Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance, and today we're going to talk about two quilts that I made. They're the exact same pattern. In fact, it's a pattern that is on my website. You can purchase it. But I also made a video about this a year ago, and you can check that out too. I'll have all this information in the first comment so you can check it out and see. Anyway, let's get back to these quilts. One is made out of a designer jelly roll. So it is Moda Sunday Stroll by Bonnie and Camille. That's this one here. And this one is made out of knockoff fabric, or what I'm calling knockoff fabric. This fabric was all purchased at Joann Fabrics. And again, if you haven't seen the original video where I pick out all the fabrics, my son actually comes with me. We do this whole thing where we have the color swatches, all of that, so we can kind of match these as best as possible. This was such a wonderful experience, and I really was excited to finish these this spring and summer. Finally, I got around to making this video because I want to compare the two in every aspect I could think of and talk about what I liked about each, and also to see how the durability is, because I haven't washed either one of these yet. So I'm gonna do that here in this video, and we're gonna also compare that too, because I'm curious about the bleeding, if there's any, just how it washes up, how it crinkles up, all of that. There are so many different ways I could compare these two, and I put a lot of time and thought into deciding on 5 categories to talk about. Those 5 categories are time and effort, cost, fabric handling, construction process, and durability. And I have them all here on a sheet because I didn't want to forget any. So that's why I'm looking down. Okay, so we're gonna start with time and effort. Now, there's so much convenience in just buying a jelly roll and just going, because everything matches, everything's perfect, everything's together, and all you have to do is grab that jelly roll, purchase it. You can even purchase it online and start sewing. However, this one, I made swatches, I took it to the fabric store. It took us a couple hours to pick the fabrics and to find that look. Now, it was quality time with my son because he helped me with the whole process, which was a lot of fun. Such a great experience, but it did take a lot of time to find these fabrics. And then once I found them, I had to go home and cut them and prepare them, where this one was completely ready to go. Another concern that I had were that these fabrics weren't exactly printed straight, so there were some issues with that, which I talk about in the original video. So this one did take a lot more time and effort to prepare before going to the sewing machine. Because of that, I am giving the win to the designer quilt in the category of time and effort. Now let's talk about cost, because this is a huge factor when you're talking about quilting. Quilting is an extremely expensive hobby, especially if you're going the designer route. And I bet you can guess who wanted this. I am gonna get into a little bit more detail about that. However, just like I did in the video, I have the whole breakdown here of what it costs for each category. Now, the batting I buy by the bolt, so I did break that down to how much batting I used. The backings for each of these, because I wanted to be consistent, this one is designer backing, so it was a little pricey. You can see that here. It matches the fabric line. This one, I chose this wonderful green that came from Joann Fabrics, and I compared it that way. I also broke it down by strip, how much each strip costs, because that was the easiest way to figure it out. I did have extra though with this one, so that's a little bit of wiggle room that we have to consider too. Overall, this one cost about $80 to make, beginning to end, including the binding, the batting, and the backing. That does not include my time or the thread. And this one cost about $40, so half the cost to get the same quilt or same quilt pattern. We know who won this one, right? This one goes to the knockoff. All right, now let's talk about fabric handling. Okay, as you can guess, this is very silky. It feels good to work with. It's a joy to work with. Everything is the same thickness. It was beautiful. You could tell it was printed on the same fabric. Quality, it just was great. However, the knockoff was not, because some were thinner and some were thicker. Probably because they're not from the same line. They're just what I picked out, or we picked out, my son and I picked out at the fabric store. So there wasn't a lot of consistency with the thickness. That became an issue with handling of the fabric and piecing it together. This was much more of a joy to piece, and the feel of it is a lot nicer. This one is more rough, or rougher, I guess, is rougher to the touch. Some are thick, some are thin. So the handling is very different on this. Even the drape, you can kind of see how this drapes a little bit better than this one. It's more stiff. I'm anxious to see what happens when we wash this. So the winner here is the designer quilt. Now let's just talk about construction, because you'd think because of the fabric handling, this would be the winner with construction. But in reality, I kind of think this is. This was a lot easier to quilt, to bind, because of the thickness and because it had a little bit of grip when I was taking it to the machine, when I was basting it, because I think of the thicker, rougher fabric. I had just an easier time. It was much more of a joy to quilt this one than this one. This was a little silky and slippery going through the machine. So the winner here is the knockoff. And we get to our final category, which is durability. Which of these is gonna wash best? I'm gonna wash them separately. I'm gonna use the same temperatures. I'm gonna use the same settings. I'm gonna dry them the same. I'm also gonna use color catchers because I am nervous on both of these about the bleeding of the fabrics. So let's do that, and through the magic of YouTube, I'll meet you back here when they are washed, dried, and we'll check them out. Now the original size of these are exactly the same, and I'm gonna have to look to see what the size is because I can't remember. 40 by 55 and a half. Both of them exactly the same size. We're also gonna measure them, see how much they shrunk up, because I'm sure they both will. I'm really curious about that too. And that's gonna be the deciding factor on which of these quilts wins this competition. I'm gonna go do that, and I'll meet you back here, which will be in a few seconds in your time. They are washed, they are dried. Look at them, they're so crinkly and so wonderful. I love them both. They both are so soft. I just can't even believe it. I really was expecting the knockoff to still be very rough, and it's not. I can't really even tell the difference between the two. If you put a blindfold on me and tried, I couldn't tell the difference. I also pulled out the color catchers, and I did mark one with designer after it came out of the dryer because I didn't want to get them mixed up. So they look great too. Look at that. There's hardly, well, I was gonna say there's hardly anything, but I don't think there's anything on these for color. I think both of these quilts held their color really well, and I'm really surprised by that. By the way, I washed them in warm water, dried them on high, so I'm really surprised. And then the other thing I'm surprised about is the amount of shrinkage. And I really, honestly, I thought this one, if I could talk, would perform really badly. So here we go. And I have them written down too, so I don't mess that up. So the knockoff, we'll start with that one. Started with a measurement of 40 by 55 and a half, and it is 37 and a half by 54 after washing. So the width shrunk by 2.5 inches and the length shrunk by 1.5. And the percentages are 6.5 for the width and 2.7 for the length. And just so you know, the average amount of shrinkage that happens with cotton fabrics is about 5%, so between 3 and 5%. So it's really close to being in that percentage. It did shrink a little bit more than the designer, and the numbers for the designer are started with 40 by 55 and a half. It is now 38, I'll hold it up, by 53 3/4. So for the width, it shrunk 2 inches, and for the length, it shrunk 1.5 inches. And that's 5% for the width and 3.15 for the length. Again, that's well within the margin of error with the shrinkage of the 3 to 5%. So, and Daisy says, hi, I think every time I turn on the camera, she decides that she's going to bark. Okay, I guess she just wanted to be part of this. I'm really stuck here because I honestly thought that the designer was going to be the winner here, but I think it's a tie. What do you think? It's a tie. It's a really close. And the crinkle effect is beautiful. You can see how they both just crinkled up so well, and I'm in love with them. So tell me what you think. Which is the winner here? I guess there's a slight win with the designer, but it's so close. I guess I'll give it to the designer. Let's do that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the comparison of these two quilts. I was really curious about this. And again, it's not a scientific test because, you know, my dryer's not calibrated and all of that, but I try to keep it as controlled as possible. Let me know what you think. What could I have done differently? What would you have done? And what do you have questions about? I'd love to hear. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.